Chapter 44, The Queen. The bells of Camelot rang with a jubilant, relentless rhythm, an aural accompaniment to the city, a sea of white blossoms and red banners. Arthur Pendragon was to be married, and Guinevere was to be crowned. Inside the citadel, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and roasted meats. Elune stood by the window of the armory, watching the procession. She wore her best leathers, cleaned of Agravain's blood, but she felt, for the first time in her life, a dread she knew she could never overcome. Arthur was marrying Guinevere. It was right, and yet, Elune knew her heart would never be mended. Arthur found her there, away from the courtiers and the noise. He was dressed in ceremonial gold, looking every bit the king the prophecies had promised. But when he looked at Elune, the royal mask slipped. "The council has cleared your name," Arthur said, his voice quiet. "The records from Tintagel have been burned. You are a knight of the Round Table, Elune. I want you at the head of the guard today." Elune turned to him, her eyes tracing the line of his jaw, the weight of the crown he now wore. Her devotion was as strong as the day she met him on the riverbank, but it had turned into a slow-acting poison. "I cannot, Arthur," she said, her voice low, delicate, a tone he had never heard her use before. "You're still healing," Arthur said quickly, moving toward her. "I know." "Gaius," said the wound, a broken bar. "It's not the wound in my side." "You idiot," she interrupted, a small, sad smile touching her lips as she insulted him gently. "I've spent years being beside you, I've lied for you, bled for you, and held you together when the world was falling apart." She looked into his eyes, at his lips, whose ghost she could sometimes feel on her own when she was still and quiet. "I can't stand at that altar and watch you give your heart to someone else, Arthur." Arthur froze. The unspoken truth that had hummed between them for years, through the sieges, the magic, and the betrayals, finally crystallized in the air between them. "Elune, a broken bar." Arthur's voice was soft, almost plaintive. "Don't," she whispered sharply, stepping back. "You love her, and she is the queen this city needs. She is your peace, Arthur. I am war, and there is no place for me in a time of peace." Elune turned to leave, but the movement snapped something in him. The king vanished, leaving only the man. Arthur lunged, his hand catching her arm and spinning her back with a desperate, uncontrolled strength. He didn't speak. There were no words left. He closed the distance, his mouth crashing against hers with a raw, terrifying intimacy. The shock of it radiated through Elune like a strike to a shield. Her breath vanished, stolen by the sudden, overwhelming heat of him, the scratch of his golden embroidery against her palms, the scent of expensive oils and sun-warmed skin, and the sheer, solid weight of him pressing her back against the stone. She clung to him, her fingers digging into the fine silk of his tunic as her knees threatened to buckle. She felt the frantic, irregular thud of his heart against her own, a rhythm that finally matched the chaos in her soul. For a heartbeat, the wedding, the throne, the world outside, ceased to exist. Arthur pulled back just enough to press his forehead against hers, his breath ragged. "Don't tell me there is no place for you," he rasped, his voice breaking. "There is no Camelot without you. There is no me." Elune looked at him, her eyes bright with the grief so profound it silenced the bells. She reached up, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw one last time, her skin still tingling from the electricity of his touch. "If I stay, I will not make the right choices for you as a king. You will not." Elune shook him away, then looked at him, adding, "You're not now." She glanced past his ear, to the north, to the east. "Lancelot is out there, somewhere beyond the borders. I'm going to find him." 88,888,888 to the path that would lead to Icknield Street, and then to Ermine Street. Elune turned when the crowd cheered for their king and queen. She didn't look back. She couldn't. She had walked from Arthur with the kiss on her lips and his touch on her skin, knowing that if she turned to look at him she could not do what was needed. From the battlements, Merlin watched as Elune led her horse through the lower gates. She carried nothing but her blades, her bedroll. He wanted to call her, to shout out to his friend to stay, and that, if she couldn't stay, to know that he would always be her friend. But the moment passed, and Merlin simply watched his friend leave Camelot, knowing that Eluned's heart, so desperate to be given, was broken. She rode past the darkling woods, past the fields where she had fought the immortal army, and didn't look back until Camelot was a mere glint of white on the horizon. For days and days she rode, living on the credit she had afforded across the land here, a table there, until she got to the wild, untamed north, the sea and a castle on a hill. Her destination was a place of legend and sorrow. Eluned had returned to Joyous Guard. The journey took weeks. She rode through the remnants of Mercia and the lawless borderlands. Her gritty reputation preceded her, keeping the bandits at bay. Her heart felt broken, but the green shoots of another love were taking hold, accelerating as the fortress came into view. No longer a ruin, the castle was alive again, with people, with activity. At the gates, a familiar figure was straining in the courtyard, his movements fluid and mournful. Lancelot stopped mid-swing as the gates groaned open. He looked at the solitary rider, her dark cloak stained with the dust of half a kingdom. Opposite him, a younger man, face similarly shaped to Lancelot, raven hair, sharp jawline yet with the broad English features of, presumably, his mother. Eluned, Lancelot breathed, dropping his sword. She dismounted, her legs shaking from the long ride. She looked at her brother, the only other soul who knew the cost of loving a Pendragon. He married her, she said, her voice cracking for the first time. Lancelot did not say a word. He stepped forward and pulled her into a crushing embrace, letting her head rest against his shoulder. They stood there for a long time, two exiles in a fortress of ghosts, listening to the waves crash against the rocks below. "What now?" Lancelot asked eventually. Eluned pulled back, wiping the salt that was not necessarily from the sea from her face. She looked out at the horizon, toward the land that had broken her. "Now we wait. The darkness is coming, Lancelot. I can feel Mordred in the wind. Arthur thinks he has found peace, but the real war hasn't even begun." She unsheathed her seeks, the one that had traveled with her down the Hayfron River as an infant, and drove it into the wooden post of the stable. "And when the time comes, we'll be ready to save him one last time. Even if he never knows we were there." Lancelot kissed her forehead. "Together," he promised. Beside them, the young men stood. "I will be beside you, father," Galahad promised. Lancelot turned and nodded, extending his other hand to his son. Camelot would not be forgotten by its northern allies.